Well, good morning. Good morning, Mosaic. Morning. If you want to turn with me to Romans chapter 13. As Rebecca said, got Bibles on the shelves around. If you need one, pick one up. We'd love for you to be able to physically read with us. And if you need one, there's one there for you. We're going to turn to Romans 13. I'm going to read that in a moment. But this morning, we are, in essence, we are looking at a passage which really speaks of what it is for us to live between two worlds. Between the world that we occupy now and the world that is coming, and how eternity reshapes everyday life. And so, when you know how the story ends, it changes how you live today. Romans 13 is going to remind us that as followers of Jesus, we are those that live between two worlds, fully engaged in the present, yet shaped by the certainty of Christ's return. And so that means that it's going to have some implications on how we live, how we honor authority, how we love others, how we live sacrificially, how we live with spiritual urgency, because tomorrow's kingdom shapes today's choices, and that is so very important for us as we wrestle with this passage and as we dig into it, that we understand what it is that is happening here. And I think it's so important that knowing how it ends changes how you live in the moment. I would say ranking right at the very top of my worst decisions that I've ever made in my life is going up Crib Goch with my family. Rebecca's rolling her eyes at this point because she's like, oh no. Because at Snowdon, they've got this wonderful route up, and there's a few different routes that can go up and over, but we decided that in the course of the day that some of us were going to go over it, and then I, in my naivety really, thought, I think we'll join with them. I think we would like to take this trip together, thinking that it was going to be signposted and it was going to be clear and it was going to be, in relative terms, safe and obvious. And as soon as we got to the peak, and I should have known by the fact that the route up is pretty darn extreme anyway, it's pretty much climbing to get to the top. We got to the very top, and you start getting buffeted by a 40-mile-an-hour wind and cloud cover that's down. And suddenly you realize, oh no, this isn't a walk in the park. There's no signage up here. This is a knife edge ridge with phenomenal drops either side. And we're about to embark on a few hours of scrambling very, very slowly on all fours across the very top of it. And for me as a parent, I'm utterly terrified because I can see all the danger. I've also got a fear of heights, by the way. I was a roofer. Don't worry, just a crashing piece of contradiction I am. But I'm on this top of this ridge, and I don't know how it's going to end. And so I don't enjoy this process at all. I don't enjoy this walk at all. I don't enjoy the scramble because I'm just terrified that I've made the worst decision of my life, and I don't know how it's going to end. Emmy here thinks it's phenomenal. So I'm literally crawling on hands and feet and knees and bellowing at the kids to get down, because the wind is... And she's standing there just walking along, like nothing's going wrong, looking at her phone going, oh, fantastic, I've got reception, start Snapchatting one of her friends. Emmy didn't have the concerns of how this was going to end. She knew how it was going to end. We're going to be on this side, we'll get some chips up at the cafe. That's how it's going to end. How we live our life, knowing how it ends, changes how you live today. Now, she lived enjoying the moment. I lived in terror. And I think that really matters, because I think if you think this world is going to end in terror and God isn't in charge and it's going to all fall apart, then a right response probably is to live in fear and to be bound and to be concerned. But when you know that Jesus is the most beautiful person that's ever been, who's in charge, in control, has already decided the end and won it for us, then actually we can walk through life with a completely different mindset, a completely different attitude, a completely different basis of our trust. And I think that is what Romans 13 is saying, is that we live between two worlds, and how the story ends changes how you live today. And so I'm going to read Romans 13, and then we're going to delight in the fact that Jesus is coming back, and it changes everything. So it says this: "Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear from the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the wrongdoer. Therefore, if it is necessary to submit to authorities, not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants, who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor, then honor. Let no debt remain outstanding, except the continuing debt to love one another. For whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. The commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other command there may be, are summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does not do harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. And do this, understanding the present time. The hour has already come for you to wake up from your slumber, because our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. The night is nearly over. The day is almost here. So let us put aside the deeds of darkness and put on the full armor of light. Let us behave decently as in the daytime, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension or jealousy. Rather, clothe yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ, and do not think how to gratify your desires of the flesh." And that last part of the passage is really the governing factor for those two earlier sections around respecting authority and love fulfilling the law. Jesus is coming back. Jesus is coming back. We know how the end of the story is. He is going to put right all that is wrong. He is going to restore what is broken. See, when Jesus returns, think about this. We won't need hospitals. We won't need police. We won't need governments. We won't need nursing homes. There'll be no violence. There'll be no hatred. There'll be no ageism. There'll be no racism. There will be none of these things, because God will bring to bear all that is right and make things right, because Jesus is coming back. And in the meantime, this is how we live. See, most people live according to what is next. We've just gone through exam season, and students live for exams, or athletes train for race days, or families prepare for Christmas. Expectant parents prepare for a baby. The future always changes the present. And Paul says the greatest future imaginable is coming. Jesus is coming back. And so it's not the next election, it's not your retirement, it's not financial security. Jesus is returning. That is the most wonderful thing. And therefore, the scriptures encourage us to live in the light of that. So the first point is this, that we live under God's authority. In chapter 13, verses 1 to 7, it says this. The context is that Rome was the center of imperial power. It was the center of governance. It was the center of power. And Caesar himself, the leader and the ruler of Rome, claimed these titles of Lord and Savior and Son of God and Bringer of Peace. These were titles that he made sure that you knew that he claimed over himself. And as Christians, they professed a very different lordship. They said, no, you aren't those things to us. Jesus is Lord. And so that confession immediately raised the question, how do Christians relate to earthly governments? And Paul refuses two extremes. He avoids the extreme here of saying, well, we just rebel. We just rebel. No, he's saying here, no, understand that government has been given for guarding against chaos. It is also not blind obedience. Instead, it's submission under the greater lordship of Jesus. And so we get this passage here where Paul strangely seems to speak out of a very sort of strange context and says, okay, I want you to obey the governing authorities around you. And the first reaction probably was, yes, but do you know who they are? They are awful. They're corrupt, they're violent, they're unfair, they're unjust. And Paul is saying our response is not either just blindly obey them or rebel against them, is that Jesus is Lord. N.T. Wright repeatedly reminds us that Paul believes earthly governments are temporary. They're temporary institutions within God's larger purposes. Governments restrain chaos. And so Paul is making that point that they've been placed there for our good, even if they're not perfect and even if we don't like them. It's never ultimate. And that helps us avoid reading Romans 13 as either an unlimited endorsement of political power or the opposite, where we just do as what we want. John Stott says government is God's servant, but never God's substitute. When governments fulfill justice, Christians cooperate. When governments contradict Christ, Acts 5 still applies. We must obey God rather than people. And so as we live within a flawed society, within a flawed governmental system, how do we speak? How do we engage online? How do we look at them? How do we engage? Are we constantly outraged? Paul's challenge to us would be, are we praying more than we're complaining? Because actually they've been placed there for us. One of the things I love about this church is that what you don't find is political tribalism. You don't find, okay, there's a green corner and a red corner, a blue corner. There's these tribes within us that divide us, that it's our first dividing line. No, I love that it doesn't divide us. There's a beautiful kingdom witness. We put those things to one side because those things aren't the central thing for us. We learn that actually we can disagree well and still honor. The second thing we see from this passage in chapter 13, 8 to 10, is that we are to live by love. This is the heart of the chapter. Paul moves from government that regulates behavior to love that transforms that behavior. The government regulates a chaotic society, but love utterly transforms from the inside out. And he's more concerned there. See, law tells us what we cannot do, but love asks, what can I do for your flourishing? A religion asks, how little can I do to get away with this? Grace asks, how much can I give? Because love always exceeds the law. Think of this, a husband who remains faithful because divorce is illegal has obeyed the law. So if he doesn't divorce because it's illegal, well, he's obeyed the law. But a husband who delights in serving his wife fulfills the law. There is something completely different between just complying with a law and fulfilling the heart of it. Love always goes further than legislation, and it speaks of something of what it is that we are to love one another. And so we think, how am I loving my neighbor, my colleagues, my spouse, the stranger, the difficult person or the lonely person? We are to live by love. And Paul is writing to churches and writing to the Roman church here. Love is visible in community. So what does that look like for us? When we welcome people into this family, do hurting people find family? Are differences carried with patience? Do we forgive quickly? Do we assume the best? Kazuki Koyama, a Japanese theologian, writes beautifully about God's 3 mile an hour pace. He says, love refuses hurry. Love notices people. Love slows down enough to see image bearers instead of interruptions. And this is a prophetic challenge in our age of speed. And so Paul then says, well, love fulfills the law. And then thirdly, Paul's encouragement to us is that we are to live awake. And this is the summit. Everything points here in what Paul is saying. Now notice Paul's language here. He speaks of night, he speaks of day, he speaks of sleep and awake and clothing and armor. These are Exodus images. And what he's saying is morning is coming. And the people of God must be ready. Martin Lloyd-Jones would say of this, he says, Christians are people who know what time it is. They know what time it is. Everyone else thinks this age is permanent. Christians know that the dawn has already begun. Christians know what time it is. See, Paul says here, most wonderfully, our salvation is nearer now than when we first believed. What does that tell us? Is that Jesus is returning and that window of time is closing, and that is good news. That is good news for us. Completion is coming. The full renewal is coming. The resurrection, the kingdom in its fullness. Let's turn to Revelation 21. It says here, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a beautiful bride, fully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and their God, and he will be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, or mourning, or crying, or pain, for the old order of things have passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the thirsty I'll give water without cost from the spring of the water of life. Those who are victorious will inherit all of this, and I will be their God, and they will be my children. We know what time it is. Our salvation is near. Imagine living in a hotel, staying in a hotel. You wouldn't renovate. You've never, ever, I can promise you, no one has ever imagined, right, I'm going to renovate the bathroom while I'm here. Or you're not going to go outside and landscape that garden in the hotel. You wouldn't do that because you know you're leaving tomorrow. You just wouldn't do it. But you'd still care for the room. You'd still leave it as you'd found it. Christians don't cling to this world. Neither do we neglect it. We steward it because it belongs to God. And that is the mindset on which we live within this world, is that why would we renovate something when it's temporary, when we're living for the permanent? And so Paul speaks here. And he says there's some things to take off if we're to be like Christ, and things to put on. Paul lists sexual immorality or debauchery or drunkenness or jealousy or quarreling or envy. He says those things aren't becoming of us. As followers of Jesus, they're not becoming of us. And why does he highlight those? Well, notice that they're mostly relational sins. They destroy community. Then Paul says, put on Christ. One of the greatest images in Paul is not merely to imitate Jesus, but to wear Jesus, to clothe yourself in him and his character, his humility, his patience, his mercy. Tim Keller would often say, holiness is putting on your true identity. You're becoming externally what God has already declared internally. So eternity changes everything. So what changes when eternity becomes real? I think our ambitions change. Success becomes faithfulness to Jesus. My possessions change. I become a steward rather than owner. My relationships change. People become eternal souls rather than inconveniences. My suffering changes. It gains perspective. See, Paul never minimizes pain, but he maximizes hope. And that's what he's speaking to in this passage in Romans 13, is that there is hope that we believe in and long for. Everything changes when eternity is real. Everyone I meet matters forever. Mitri Rehab, writing from the context of the Palestinian Christians living amidst conflict, often stresses that Christian hope is never escapism. The expectation of God's future empowers faithful witness in the present. He speaks of hope as a resistance against despair rather than a withdrawal from the world. And that insight sits well alongside Romans 13, because believers, we anticipate God's future by embodying his kingdom values now. Or Tokumba Edeum similarly reminds the African church that the gospel transforms every sphere of life: public responsibility, family, economics, justice, and community. He would teach that Romans 13 refuses a split between a spiritual faith and a civic life, that our everyday society becomes a testimony to God's reign. And so let's bring it home to Mosaic. Let's bring it home to us. Imagine if everyone in Basingstoke knew one thing about us. Now, there are many wonderful churches in this town, each doing wonderful things, but what would they know about us, our church family? What would we want it to be? Well, I sincerely hope that we wouldn't want them to find out about our music or our coffee or our excellent programs. We don't want to be known for those good things. Those aren't the things that should roll off the tongue at the first moment. Oh, they've got great coffee. I don't care about our coffee. I really have no interest in whether we run great programs or our kids' work is great, or those aren't the things that should be the first things that people know about us. I want them to know that we're the kindest people they've ever met, that we honor people, that we serve this town, that we carry hope, that we live sacrificially, that we don't panic like everyone else, and that we genuinely live as though Jesus is coming back. Because that is what Romans 13 is telling us. That we live knowing that Jesus is coming back. And so as I close, they use this passage, Paul uses this image of night and day and mornings and breakthrough. Imagine watching a sunrise. Now, no one argues with the dawn. You don't sit there and compete with it. You just simply start living differently. As soon as the dawn breaks, you live differently. Your lights go off because you don't need them. Your curtains are open because you want God's light. People get dressed. Work begins. You don't argue with the dawn. You just live differently. Paul says the dawn has begun in Christ. And so as followers of Jesus, we don't live like it's midnight anymore. We live differently. We wake up. We lay aside darkness. We put on Christ. We walk in love. We honor others and we serve faithfully because Christ the King is coming. Can we stand together? If you're able to stand, please stand. Band, if you wouldn't mind coming and serving us, that would be amazing. Jesus is returning. And so that has an implication for now. See, every ordinary moment becomes extraordinary when lived in the light of eternity. Every conversation, every act of generosity, every unseen sacrifice, every prayer, every decision, they all become extraordinary lived in the light of eternity. The reason is because the night is nearly over and the day is almost here. And so as a church, we are a church that lives in the knowledge that tomorrow is coming, that Jesus is returning. His kingdom is with us. And in a moment, we're going to take communion. This beautiful rehearsal, this beautiful declaration that we have a certain hope. We have a certain confidence. We know that Jesus is returning, that he is going to rescue and retain his kingship. And so as we sing this song, we've got bread, we've got juice, we've got gluten-free bread. We've got them at the back of the auditorium here. Feel free to please go get some bread and some juice, and maybe if you see someone nearby that it would bless them for you to go get them, maybe ask if that would be a blessing that you would go get some for them as well. And let's bring it all back together. And then we're going to take communion together as one family, that we're rehearsing that we live in the good, that the dawn is broken and the day is starting. So let's sing, let's enjoy that, and then we're going to take communion together.